Hi, everyone. This is Ray Luskin, the creative activist, and I'm here today with Rahman Baca. He's a Marine Iraq war veteran and the artistic director of Exit 12 Dance Company in New York City. He served in Fallujah, Iraq from 2005 to 2006, and in 2007, when he returned, he co-founded Exit 12 Dance Company. He's choreographed several major works relating to the military and their families. He writes and lectures about his experience. His dance company has been recognized by Time Magazine, Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, just to name a few. As a teaching artist, he has traveled to Iraq and New York City public schools, teaching young adults how to express their experience through choreography and nonverbal expression. He was inducted into the New York State Veteran Hall of Fame in 2015. He is a recipient of a 2016 scholarship to Lincoln Center Education, a 2015 fellowship from the Veterans for Global Leadership, and so many more. But I'm going to, instead of me telling you about him, I'm going to have him speak to us directly. Thank you for being with us, Rahman.
Thank you for the invitation. It's so nice to talk to you.
Yes, thank you. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background, a dancer, being a Marine, and then coming back and being a dancer again.
Kind of a long and drawn-out story that I'll try and sum up. I was a classical ballet dancer before I joined the Marine Corps. I started in a small studio in New Mexico dancing, taking classes in ballet and jazz, and because of that I started performing in musical theater productions and ballet productions as well. I decided to study dance more intently, and I enrolled in the University of New Mexico as a dance major, and then took a leap of faith and moved to the East Coast to study at a ballet conservatory called the Nutmeg Conservatory for the Arts in Connecticut, where I started studying classical ballet specifically in a pre-professional track. Then after, I know, telling my story, it sounds like such a...
It sounds like the beginning of a joke, you know? It's like ballet dancer,
know, right?
Goes into the Marine recruiting office, right?
I studied in classical ballet at the conservatory, and then after I graduated from their post-graduate program, I started dancing professionally as a guest artist, doing productions like Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty as a professional dancer. And after doing that for a few years, there were a couple of things in my life that kind of pulled me towards service and pulled me towards wanting to challenge myself in a different way that was totally different than being a dancer and being in the arts. And so I decided to make a change in my life and joined the United States Marine Corps, where I became a TOW anti-tank missile assaultman, which means that we were trained on the missile system that fires missiles at tanks. I joined a unit and we started training, and in 2005 our unit was deployed to Fallujah, Iraq, one of the most dangerous places in Iraq at the time. And they didn't really have a need for the missile system, but what they did have a need for was small patrol units that could employ heavy machine guns. So we were cross-trained on the 50 cal heavy machine gun, the Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher, and other small arms. And our primary mission was to patrol the villages in Fallujah looking for insurgents. We did that for about 5 months, and we had developed this way of operating that was very aggressive, very violent, in an attempt to discourage attacks from anyone that might be planning an attack. We didn't want to make it look like it was going to be easy for them. And what that posture did is it did not give us a good working relationship with the towns and the villages that were surrounding our AO, area of operation. And so because of that, a couple of our leaders and the Marine Corps decided to change our mission a little bit and imbibe it with a humanitarian element. And so in the last couple of months that we were in Fallujah, along with going out and looking for insurgents, we also tried to do good things in the villages. Like we went into one of the schools and handed out school supplies. We would make sure we had food and water to hand out to the locals when we were on patrols. We tried to have more meetings with the leaders of the villages to gain intel and information and also engender trust. And I think it was that part of being deployed that really spoke to me and spoke to the Marines that I worked with, because we actually felt like we were doing something. It was a drop in the bucket, of course, but we felt like we were actually being productive and doing something that mattered. So when I got home, yeah, interject whenever you want, because I could go on.
Okay, yeah, I know you can talk. I have heard you speak, yes. Okay, so I was going to ask you, when you came home, let's talk about PTSD a little bit and some of the experience and the trauma that you brought back with you. And let's talk about your healing path, how you use creativity for healing.
It's interesting, and the interesting thing about it is, I got back in 2006, and when I got back, there was a definite path that I had chosen. I didn't know what to do after war, so I followed my grandfather's example. He was a Korean War veteran, and when he returned from service in Korea, he got a good job as a postman. He got serious with my grandmother and married, and they bought the house that he still lives in today. My grandmother, God rest her soul, passed away a couple of years ago. But I wanted to do the same thing, and I felt like serving in a war was a monumental transition of sorts, and that I should get my act together, if you will. Let me choose a colloquialism. And so I got a good job as a technical specialist for a stormwater company. I bought a condo with my combat pay that I had earned overseas, and I got serious with my girlfriend. And about 6 months later, we had one of those ominous talks where my girlfriend sat me down and she said, you're not the guy I knew before the war. You're angry, you're anxious, you're depressed. There's a lot going on that this isn't right. And I figured that she was just going to leave and let me figure it out. But instead, she was like, how can we change this? Like, what's missing in your life? What can we do to make this better? And she said, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? And kind of off the cuff, I said, I've always wanted to start a dance company. Which is true. I have been a choreographer for a while, and choreography interested me, and I missed it. And so she said, let's do it. She's a ballerina as well, classically trained. And so she helped me hire another dancer, and we went into a studio in New York City and started creating dance. And we started just creating neoclassical ballet choreography that really had no choreographic direction or meaning. And then a couple months later, we started sending these videos around to luminaries in the field and asking for feedback. And one of the best choreographers around, Stephen Mills out of Ballet Austin, said, let me give you 3 pieces of advice. And the first 2 were technical. And the third one, he said, you really haven't found your voice, that one thing inside of you that is aching to come out and that's aching to be spoken about. So I took a really hard look at that. And for me, of course, that was the military experience. I felt coming home that the military experience was so misrepresented in the mainstream media and in what the people at home were getting. And I was, in the midst of seeing all of these Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen coming home from service and grappling with so much change and transition problems and, like you said, PTSD, TBI, and I felt I wanted to shed some light on those issues. And so we started creating works about the military experience.
Okay. Now, did you start bringing in some of your friends to do this, or just was it a personal story that you started with? And did you collaborate at all with therapists or anything like that and bring them in and make this a bigger thing? Because I do know some other people have worked with dance in this way, and when they've created a piece, then they have a talk back session afterwards, so then you have opportunities. And so I'm just curious what your program is really like, your pieces.
Yeah. In 2007 when we started, there was two goals. One was to create professional quality dance, and the second was to communicate this experience to audiences so that they would either feel empowered to advocate for veterans' benefits, veterans' mental health, or to reach out and help someone, or to kind of change their mind about military service. Because I think, especially in 2007, there was this really loud chorus of saying that, military people are all warmongers and they just want to go kill people. And that wasn't true of who I was, and that wasn't true of the men that I served with. And so it's not in every person's story, but I felt it was important enough for me to talk about. Okay. And so when we started performing, I brought in some Marines that I had served with, and half of the cast on stage were Marines and half the cast on stage were ballerinas, and we created this story incorporating classical ballet with military movements and classical music with military radio transmissions, in order to create a certain sense of chaos between kind of humanity and conflict. Since then, exactly what you asked happened. We had all of these requests for choreographers to come in and start talking about things that were important to them, because at the time we were one of the only dance organizations that was accessible and that was doing this type of work. And so we had a choreographer come in and choreograph a work about the Arab Spring uprising. We had a choreographer who was an Army mother come in and... Are you still there?
I'm here. I'm listening.
Okay. I didn't know if I lost the call. Or,
no, you didn't lose me. I'm intrigued by your stories, and there is somebody I'd love you to connect with after this, because this is part of being a creative activist. I don't know if you know her. Lisa Peacock, she started the Art Vet Project, and she does a lot with poetry and drama, and
oh, wow.
You two would have a lot to, and it's supposedly, I think it's in every state now. She started here in Chicago. I mean, she's been working on her PhD now in drama in Ireland with veterans. So she's not available right this minute, but I certainly think the two of you can connect.
There's some true power behind this work. In the times that we've been around, we've had the opportunity to take our work and do exactly what you're talking about with Lisa and speak to this, I think they call it complementary therapy. So we've had the opportunity to go to Stanford University and talk about medicine and the muse and really start conversations about this type of work with and for not only the military community, but the community of people who have been affected by conflict. So, military families, you're talking about refugees, you're talking about people that have been on the periphery of war and involved in war in so many different ways. And then in November, we're headed to the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, Arizona to attend a symposium on humanities and healthcare. And so
I love that. Yeah.
It's just been incredible to see one, that this work has proved valid in today's world, and two, that it has a purpose as a complementary therapy of sorts for so many.
How has it changed your life since you've been doing this work?
Oh my God, it has completely changed my life. Personally, I had the opportunity. I kind of learned that this life was transformative for me by accident. In kind of the pursuit to create a career and to make sure I was paying attention to my career path. I made a choice a couple of years ago to take on another position and to pour my heart and soul and education and mind into this position, which meant stepping back a little bit from Exit 12 and the work that we were doing. And a couple months after that, I found myself, sitting face to face with a counselor at the VA, talking about the issues that I was having. And in those therapy sessions, she, it wasn't all going back to art. She got me inspired to go back to taking ballet classes and to working out a little bit more to fulfill that physical need that, my body wanted to keep moving, but also to go back to service and go back and find that purpose that Exit 12 had created.
That's why I
proven,
personally, for the creative activist, I start my book when I wrote the book, Art and Service Saved My Life. And that's truly what I believe. It is those two components that gave me my greatest transformation in life and helped me heal and have a richer, fuller, more meaningful life because of what I could do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I'm sure you felt the reverberations of that around the people around you. There are so many stories of just utter joy that have come from doing this work, and unfortunately, utter sadness from doing this work. And I think
you want to talk about that a little bit more.
I think I'll start with the sadness. We had a dancer who joined us about 6 years ago. She was she had just had a New York Times article on her and how persistent she was as a freelance dancer in New York. And so we hired her, and she started performing with us. And in particular, one of the roles that she was playing in one of our works was this woman who goes, and this is a true story, a woman who goes to the airport to meet her husband's platoon when they're returning from overseas. And she's walking around the airport, and she's seeing all of the military men come off the plane and military women. And she's scanning the area for her husband, and she doesn't see him, and time passes, and she's the only one left at the airport. And one of the family readiness officers comes over, and in their interaction, her explaining what she was there for, she finds out that, her husband was injured 2 days ago in a violent action overseas, and then she doesn't see him again for 3 months later in the burn unit when he is finally transported home. And so we kind of depict this on stage through dance and through audio. And it's one of the most heart-wrenching pieces that we do. And we gave Taylor this responsibility to take this role on. And with all of our performers and artists, we give them these roles that are so honest and so raw. And we really trust in our artists because of who they are and what they bring to the table. And Taylor will tell you that for 2 years she performed this work, and she did her best to do it justice. And then her brother enlisted in the United States Army and was deployed to Afghanistan twice. And for her, the role that she was playing suddenly came real. Exit 12 for her suddenly became her life. And so much more important than just going on stage and doing a role, but communicating all of this to audiences so that they feel empowered to do something.
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, a couple of months ago, we were raising a glass to the fact that Taylor's brother got out of the Army. He finished his enlistment, and we celebrated and raised a glass to him remotely. He was in another state, and Taylor announced it, and so we had to honor him. And then 3 days later, Taylor got the news that he had taken his own life.
Oh.
And
not uncommon. I mean, I know the statistics are huge. This is not an uncommon occurrence.
And I think the statistics, while strong, miss that human part of what it means. Getting that phone call from Taylor and consequently going to her brother's memorial service and experiencing it there just are no words to the cavern of emptiness that is created by something like that. And I think, one of the things that gave me a bit of solace, and I hope gave Taylor a bit of solace, was that, number one, her brother's not going to be forgotten. And number two, we are all actively participating in work to address the issues that kind of created this mess.
Well, that was going to be my next question. You've talked about advocacy. What are some of your thoughts and suggestions how people can advocate for returning soldiers and helping them through this process? And what are things people can do in general and specifically if they are dealing with a loved one?
Number one, Veterans Crisis Line. The Veterans Crisis Line is one of the best resources out there for a veteran who is in dire need of some help. And so I think it takes a bit of empathy to kind of realize that a veteran is in peril and to kind of coax them to the Veteran Crisis Line. I think...
Can I ask, maybe this is too personal or you don't know the answer,
yeah.
Did Taylor know that her brother was in crisis? How did he present
Absolutely
himself
not.
when he got back? Okay.
So, unfortunately, she never saw him. Well, I don't know. From the time he finished his enlistment, it was a couple of days. He didn't make it home, literally and figuratively.
Okay.
I think talking about the questions you ask, there's so many ways to go because we're dealing with so many things. We're not only dealing with PTSD and TBI, we're dealing with not a new problem, but a problem that has been glazed over for centuries. The problem of moral injury. The problem of being asked to do things
that's an interesting term. Let's talk about what is moral injury.
A lot of it's a term that they've coined recently to describe, the feelings of either not doing enough while deployed or being asked to do things that you don't necessarily agree with, whether that's on a micro scale or a macro scale, and the ways that, and then you look at veterans' transitions back to civilian life. The veteran life, the military life, while probably hard to deal with, is kind of, and I'm going to explain this. It's kind of easy because you don't have to deal with the normal day-to-day things you have to deal with as an individual, as a civilian. Your bills are pretty much paid for. Your food is pretty much paid for, or provided. You don't really have to think about what you wear. You don't have to think about what you're going to do for the day. It's planned. there's very little decision making and or decision making that goes in a day-to-day kind of military life. And I'm overgeneralizing, right? Just to show the contrast.
Right.
And so when a veteran kind of gets out of the military and comes home, there's a big transition, because then, one of the pieces that we have is to a poem by a Marine Sergeant William Michael Day, who served in Al Nazari and Al Kuwait, and he talks about, the bills and the responsibilities, and not that they're insurmountable, but just that they're so much different than the world that we were living prior.
Okay.
And so when you look at all of these things that we're addressing, of course, when a veteran's in crisis, when a veteran's in peril, veteran crisis line. But then there are a lot of transitory services that are helping veterans not only transition back to civilian life, but also rediscover that feeling of service and purpose that a great portion of the military joined the military to accomplish and to feel. And there are tons out there. Red, White, and Blue is a wonderful organization. The Mission Continues, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. And I could go on and on and on about all of these organizations that are getting veterans out of their chairs and up and helping other people. And, that's where I found my purpose is, in the service that Exit 12 is. A lot of it has been through opportunities and partnerships with veterans organizations, with universities, to be able to go in and perform and lecture and workshop with veterans and civilians. I think the key
Can you talk a little bit about the collaborative process that you've gone through and some of the keys to creating those kind of partnerships for you, or any of the challenges you've had?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've been incredibly blessed to go into a community of people and organizations that want to help veterans and want to help civilians understand veterans, vice versa. And most of the partnerships that we've engaged in have been incredibly rewarding. Usually it's been by an introduction or a reach out from the other organization to us. And what's great about it is, and what's been great with all of these organizations that we've worked with, like Stanford University, West Point Military Academy, Walter Reed, is that we put an emphasis on the product. And the product is, whether it's the creative product, the workshop that we're doing, that's the priority. And we make that clear at the beginning. And then we work out all the logistical and financial details, which are important. But for us, the importance is making it work, because it's an important work.
Okay. I have one other organization that might be a fit for you, and it's called A Window Between Worlds. It started off, it's an organization that did artwork with women who had been sexually abused and children. And they have been asked by veteran groups to take on working with veterans. So that's another organization there in California that might be a good fit for you. So, yeah. So there are so I have met some people over the time, and after we're done, I'll make the introductions for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think, again, as a creative activist, you have to be open to partnerships and collaboration and connecting with other people to make your work more effective and to get the word out there. And there's so many people with incredibly good ideas, but they don't know how to partner. And therefore, they get stuck and stymied in that versus being able to step into a bigger platform and share their work. That's so important. There are so many great ideas out there. So I love what you're doing. I'd like to move on a little bit. Do you have any other words about how people can be advocates at all before we move on and help veterans? Let's finish that, and then I'll go on to my other piece. So.
Yeah, and then I think I think it speaks to a larger thing. I think if we zoom back and like widen the lens a bit, it's just a lot of what we do is about developing empathy, and that's just kind of seeing the person across from you as the person they are, not the person you believe them to be. It's not only helped us in our work, but I think it's helped us in our partnerships too. That we have a certain there's an importance and there's a priority put on making sure that our partner gets something positive out of the partnership, and that we're not the only organization benefiting. And I think we've had organizations that work with us very, very well in that way. And it comes from seeing the mutual benefit, not just the sole benefit.
Mhm. Okay. That's fabulous. I wanted to ask you, and I heard it in your talk about going back to Fallujah, working with children, and somehow making amends, which I guess goes back to that moral injury piece. And I'd like you to talk more about that and what that means to you right now and where that's going.
In Fallujah, we try to do so much, right? We tried to do so much good in those villages, and I think a lot of us came back saying that, if we could only have done this, if we could only have done that, and a lot of it felt unfinished. And in 2012, I had the wonderful opportunity to partner with an organization called, The Mission Continues, who gave me a fellowship to work with an organization here in New York City called Battery Dance Company. And what Battery Dance Company does is they go into other countries and they create opportunities for divergent groups to come together and work together and dance together using choreography and improvisation. And so with Battery Dance Company, we had an opportunity to go back to Iraq as dance teachers, myself and Robin Cantrell, and we ended up working with 30 young people, ages 16 through 24, from two regions of Iraq, one Erbil, which is in Kurdistan in the north, and Kirkuk, which is south of Erbil, and it's primarily Arab, Sunni Shia Arab. And I think, as an artist, and most of the artists listening will say, art's a great connector, because in art we can find not only shared experience, but, a connecting point. But I had never seen it happen and come about as clearly as it did in Iraq. Our goal was to bring those two groups of young people together, have them choreograph a dance, and then have a theme applied to the dance that the students felt was important to be communicated, and then to perform it in their community, right there in Erbil. It was close enough to Kirkuk that people drove from Kirkuk to Erbil to see the performance. In the first day, we all had lunch in the courtyard after doing a warm-up and a couple dance exercises. We all had a lunch in the courtyard, and the students from Erbil corralled on one side, and the students from Kirkuk corralled on the other side of the courtyard, and they kind of made fun of each other and poked fun of each other. And then, Robin and I got these students working and dancing and putting them in uncomfortable situations. I mean, monitored, but uncomfortable, of weight sharing exercises and teaching and learning and creating. And we also engaged them in conversations about what it meant to be an Iraqi, what it meant to, what they thought America thought of them, what they thought of America, what they wanted out of life, which is not unlike you or I. They just want to be able to walk down the street without being blown up, and to find a good job that they enjoy, and to settle down and create a life for themselves. And so that's what we made the dance about, is just those themes of shared experience and conflict, and coming out the other side and knowing that there's a hope for a better future. And after working together for 5 days, 5 hours a day, we performed the work for 250 members of the community. At the end of the performance, students said that they had made friends in Kirkuk and Erbil, that they would visit and remain friends. And people from the community brought us flowers and asked us when we were coming back and which cities we were going to next, because they saw what this work could do.
I heard that. I'm speechless. It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
So when are you going back?
My goodness.
I know there are some other pieces. You are also interested in bringing more. Let's talk about bringing more veterans and how you see yourself growing in this capacity, and what's a legacy you'd like to leave?
So to answer the first question, we had an opportunity to go back in November. So we were in Erbil in 2012 in April, and there was a soft invitation to go to Baghdad in November, which fizzled because of the security situation. And then a couple months later, we were invited back to Baghdad again to go to some of the Baghdadi universities and Iraqi universities in the surrounding towns and do kind of a lecture goodwill tour and talk about the work we did in the north in order to kind of solidify the importance of culture and history. Yeah. Are you still there?
Hello?
Sorry.
No. Hello?
Weird. Are you still there?
Okay, you cut out for a second. I don't know. Technical difficulties. Okay. Okay. So the last thing I heard is you got invited to do a goodwill tour.
Yeah, and go back. And that, as we were planning that, ISIS moved into the area and started their surge. And, of course, all plans to go to the region were put on hold indefinitely. Mm-hmm. So I've been actively working to go back. Last year, I was preparing to create an application for a Fulbright to go into Turkey and to start working with refugees. But again, the security situation in Turkey has not gone in a positive direction. So currently, Exit 12 is continuing to tour, perform, and create work. We just finished a work called The Odyssey based on Homer's Odyssey and bringing a current lens to Homer's depiction of the warrior. I'm creating a new work based on Benjamin Britten's War Requiem and looking at War Requiem from a choreographic standpoint. And I'm also just putting the final touches on a Fulbright application to go to the UK to to get my master's in choreography at the Trinity Laban Conservatory in London, but also to look at what the UK is doing in terms of veterans and theater. They've launched a ton of initiatives in the UK as using dance and theater as complementary therapies for veterans when they exit the military. Things like there's an organization called Relive that's creating theater work. There's an organization called Rosie K. Dance Company that created a work called Five Soldiers. The National Theatre of Scotland not only did Black Watch, but to celebrate the centennial of World War I, they had a bunch of people dress up in period-type costumes and just walk around different locations as kind of to remind people of conflict. And so that's the second thing I'm going to do. And then the third thing is to start connecting with UK military and Iraqi military that have relocated to London, to Britain, and to create a work around the Rite of Spring, military themed. So Stravinsky wrote the Rite of Spring in around 1605, 1606, and there's an author that kind of parallels the creation and performance of the Rite of Spring to the buildup of World War I and the impetus to World War I. And so the opportunity to go and look at that and create a full-scale piece that brings in, the military voice and kind of the Iraqi military voice and shapes this work into something that will communicate that experience is extremely exciting.
Have you worked at all with any disabled dancers or brought them into any of your pieces, talking about that piece coming through?
We've done workshops with veterans with injuries, and invisible injuries and visible, and we've had tremendous success. It's
okay. I've started to see that more and more, and if there was a woman, she was in New York, she's from Canada, that's done that, and they've done a lot of pieces, whether it's with wheelchairs or people, on the scarves, I forgot the aerial dancing kind of thing, and also there's Access Dance Company in California that does that. And so Judith, I know is advocating for people with disabilities, because she's also saying you can enter into the system at any point in your life. You may not, know. And so, I was just curious if that's been part of your conversation at all.
We've, I've talked with Judith, and I think the other person you're talking about is Heidi Latsky.
Yep, that's the one. Thank you. I couldn't think of her name. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked at length, and we've not only had veterans come in and participate in our workshops and have transformative experiences. We've also gone into VA hospitals and performed for veterans. And, Judith and Heidi will tell you a lot about the experience of a disabled person or a person with a disability, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah, I've talked to Judith, so I have not talked to Heidi. Yeah.
But then, we were at the Bronx VA hospital here in New York City, and we had one of the doctors come over and tell us that watching dance for patients who are immobilized is very good for them, because what it does is it causes the same neurotransmitters in the brain to fire as if they were dancing along with the performers. And, that was one of the first performances we did at the VA, and so now we actively look for opportunities to do that again and again. We've done it out in the Palo Alto VA system, here in New York. We've been up in the Connecticut VA system. So, it's been an important work of ours that is central to what we do.
Okay, we are starting to run out of time, so we could probably talk for another hour. But I'd love for you to tell people how they can get a hold of you, find out more.
The best way is our website, www.exit12dancecompany.org, and it has a contact us page. It has a newsletter link. It has videos, testimonials, and outlines of our workshops. There's a lot of information just right there at our website, and we respond to everything.
Well, I will attest to that. He got back to me right away when I emailed. So yes, it was wonderful. So I would just love if you could go back. You just mentioned one thing about what the arts do, the movement, the dance. It causes new neurotransmitters. What else would you say is a benefit of embracing the arts in your own life and in your healing?
It's been seeing what the arts means to other people. I think specifically about what we're talking about, the veterans that have come and taken our workshops have testified that they've rediscovered a part of themselves across the board. We had a Vietnam veteran who was a very violent person in his military career, and because of that, he became a laborer and was very hard his whole life. And he took our dance workshop, and Taylor, the dancer we talked about before, there's this part where we pair them together and we do this thing called mannequinning, where one dancer is frozen and the other dancer poses them in various positions. And at one point, Taylor took the veteran's head and was kind of moving it back and forth to find the correct position that she was envisioning. And the veteran reflected on that after the workshop and said it took him back to when his son was 2 years old, and he would hold his son and look at him, and his son would put his fingers out and grab his daddy's face and just kind of move it back and forth. And for him, that awakened that part of him that had been dead so long of letting other people in and trusting them enough to figure it, let them touch your face and to let them be a part of you. Another veteran, an Afghanistan veteran, reflected on the same thing after a dance workshop. He was doing a movement contact improv exercise where they were, suspending from each other and weight-bearing exercises. And afterwards he reflected that it reminded him that he was still needed and valued. So for me, a lot of what Exit 12 is seeing the impact and being a part of the impact that it has on others.
I love that. Thank you. And do you have any final words?
I just can't thank you enough for spending this much time with me.
Oh, well, thank you for everything you're doing and how you're making a difference around the world. I mean, it's not just here.
Thank you.
It's not just for our veterans coming back, but you're also envisioning a world that's different, where people are coming together in a way that fortifies the beauty of each human soul and recognizes that we are all one. And I just love that. So thank you for the work you're doing. I really appreciate it.
My honor, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Oh, thank you. So for everybody listening, this is Ray Luskin, the creative activist, and thank you for being part of our call today, and thank you for Roman for doing all the work you do. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank